40 years, 40 years of waiting, 40 years of preparation, and now the time has come.
Joshua, Moses is dead. Now you shall lead my people. Arise, be strong and courageous, for wherever you tread, that land shall be yours.
But Canaan was not empty. There were impenetrable walls, armies ready for war, and at the head of Israel, a man who had to trust in God alone.
Am I truly ready for this?
But before the battle, before drawing the sword, God appeared.
Are you with us, or with our enemies?
I am not on your side, nor the enemies. I stand with the Lord.
The war was about to begin. The fate of a nation hung in the balance. But not all victories would bring glory. Not all battles would be triumphs. For even the brave may doubt.
Lord, why have you forsaken us?
Israel has sinned. Until the sin is purged, you will not prevail.
But when all seemed lost, God did the unthinkable. The sun stood still. This is the story of a promise fulfilled, of an impossible conquest, of a God who never fails. Joshua. The wilderness was now behind them. For 40 years, Israel wandered without direction. Their fathers died without seeing the promise, because when God spoke at Sinai, they did not believe. But now, a new generation arose. They were no longer slaves of Egypt. They were an army, ready to take the land God had promised them. And at their head stood a man, not a prophet like Moses, not a king like David, but a warrior, Joshua, son of Nun, from the heights of Mount Nebo. Moses gazed upon the promised land. God allowed him to see it with his own eyes, but not to enter. It was the end of his journey. And on that mountain, God called him home. The people mourned his death, but the grieving did not last long, because the mission was not over, and God raised up a new leader.
Joshua, my servant Moses is dead. Now arise, lead this people into the land I have promised them. Every place the sole of your foot treads shall be yours. No one will be able to stand against you, for just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. Be strong and courageous. Do not turn from my law. Meditate on it day and night, for if you do, you will prosper in all you undertake.
Joshua heard the voice of God, and his heart was strengthened. He had waited for this moment all his life. He had served as Moses' aide. He had witnessed the miracles in Egypt. He had been one of the 2 spies who believed, and now it was his time. He rose, gathered the leaders of Israel, and declared,
The time has come. God has given us this land. Prepare provisions, for in 3 days we cross the Jordan.
Among the leaders, one stepped forward. It was Caleb, son of Jephunneh, an old man, yet with the spirit of a youth. He had fought beside Joshua in Egypt. He had believed the promise when others doubted. He had watched his entire generation perish in the wilderness. But he remained standing, because God had promised him life, to see the promised land with his own eyes. Then Caleb spoke and said,
40 years ago, Joshua, only you and I believed in the promise. The others perished But God has sustained us, and today it is our turn to fight for what is ours.
That's right, Caleb. We saw the land, and now we will take it.
But before the conquest, they needed to know their enemy. Joshua sent 2 spies to the most fortified city in Canaan, Jericho. Walls taller than any stronghold, guards watching day and night, a king determined to resist. But inside Jericho, there was fear. The people had heard about Israel. They knew what their God had done in Egypt, and they knew soon the Israelites would be at their gates. The spies entered in secret, but the guards discovered them, and they were pursued until they found refuge in the house of a woman. Her name was Rahab, a woman of ill repute, but with a heart full of faith. She hid them, and when the guards left, she spoke.
I know the Lord has given you this land. Terror of you has fallen upon us. Since Egypt, we have heard how your God parted the Red Sea, how you destroyed the kings beyond the Jordan. Our hearts have melted. So I beg you, spare me and my family when you take the city.
Then one of the spies answered her,
Rahab, because you have shown faith. When God delivers this city into our hands, you and your family will live. Tie a scarlet cord in your window, and no harm will come to you.
The spies escaped down the wall, and when they returned to camp, they reported to Joshua. The people of Jericho are terrified. God has already given the city into our hands.
Then the time has come. We prepare to cross the Jordan and conquer the land.
The day arrived. Israel gathered on the banks of the Jordan. The river was at flood stage, impossible to cross, but God gave instructions.
Let the priests take the Ark of the Covenant and go before the people. When their feet touch the water, the Jordan will be cut off.
The priests obeyed. They took the ark and took the first step. And then the miracle happened. The waters stopped. The river parted. And Israel crossed on dry ground, just as their fathers had at the Red Sea, because the God who brought them out of Egypt was the same God who would lead them to victory. Israel had crossed the Jordan. The river, once an impassable barrier, was now behind them. There was no turning back. Ahead of them, Jericho, the most impenetrable walls in Canaan, the first obstacle in their conquest. But before raising the sword, before shouting the battle cry, God commanded something unexpected.
Joshua, before you conquer the land, you must consecrate my people, circumcise every male. For this generation has not yet sealed my covenant, and until they do, they cannot claim what is theirs.
Joshua responded in surprise.
Lord, but if we weaken ourselves now, we could be attacked.
Trust in me, Joshua, for you will not win by the sword, but by my hand.
Joshua obeyed, and at the foot of the hill, near the Jordan, Israel came to a halt. Every man, from the youngest to the oldest, was circumcised, an act of obedience, an act of consecration, an act to remind them they were God's people. For days, the warriors could not move. They were wounded, vulnerable. If Jericho attacked, it would mean their end. But Jericho did not attack, for the terror of the Lord had fallen upon the city, and in that place, God renewed his covenant with Israel, because until that day, the people still bore the shame of Egypt. But from that day forward, They were free. Then God declared,
Today I have rolled away the disgrace of Egypt from you. Now you are a holy people. This place shall be called Gilgal, for here I have removed your reproach.
That night, the people celebrated Passover, the first Passover in the Promised Land. For the first time in 40 years, they did not eat manna. They took grain from Canaan. They harvested fruit from the valley, because from that day on, God would send no more manna. Now Israel would feed from the land he had promised them. The past was behind them. It was time to advance. It was time for battle. But before Joshua gave the order to march, he encountered a mysterious figure. It was night. Joshua went out alone in silence. From a hill, he surveyed Jericho. The walls rose like sleeping giants. Sentinels patrolled the towers. The city seemed impregnable. Joshua frowned, his mind raced with strategies, but in his heart there were doubts. Could they really take Jericho? How could they conquer such a city? And then he saw something. A few yards away stood a man, tall, clad in gleaming armor, with a drawn sword. Joshua immediately gripped his weapon. He approached cautiously, and with a firm voice, he demanded,
Are you for us or for our enemies?
The stranger answered,
I am not on your side, nor the enemies. I stand with the Lord. I am the commander of the army of God.
Joshua froze. An invisible power pressed upon him. His hands trembled, for he understood this was no ordinary soldier. This was a celestial being, a messenger of God. And in that moment, Joshua did the only thing he could do. He fell to his knees and said,
My Lord, what command does my God give to his servant?
Take off your sandals, for the place where you stand is holy.
Joshua obeyed instantly. Barefoot, his face bowed to the ground, he listened intently. In that moment, he realized this war would not be won with swords or human strategies. The conquest of Canaan depended not on man's strength, but on divine will.
Rise, Joshua. The Lord has already delivered Jericho into your hands, but you will not take it by might or weapons. You will take it through obedience. You will march, and when the time comes, walls will fall. For this battle is not yours, it is the Lord's.
Joshua lifted his eyes, but the commander of the Lord's army was gone. Only the twinkling stars remained in the sky, the warm desert wind, and in the depths of his heart, a renewed understanding. This was not his war. It was God's war. With determination in his gaze, Joshua stood and returned to camp. Now he knew exactly what must be done. Joshua gathered Israel's captains. His eyes burned with unshakable certainty. He knew the plan, but when he explained it, the warriors fell silent, bewildered.
My lord, march around the city in silence, without attacking? No spears? No battering rams?
My Lord, the soldiers of Jericho will laugh at us. They'll think us cowards.
Joshua, with firm and authoritative voice, replied,
This is not our plan. It is God's. We will obey, and he will bring down those walls.
And so the march began. At dawn, the priests took up the Ark of the Covenant. The blast of trumpets pierced the air as Israel's army advanced toward Jericho. In complete silence, they encircled the city. From the walls, the Canaanites watched with a mix of confusion and dread. Some mocked, others felt an inexplicable terror. Never had they seen an army act this way. Not a single word left the Israelites' lips. They marched one full circuit, then returned to camp. For 6 days they repeated the ritual: march, silence, wait, until the 7th day arrived. The sun rose on the horizon, and the people prepared. This time they would not march once, they would circle 7 times. The priests blew the trumpets fiercely, and the Ark of the Covenant led the procession. On the walls, Jericho's soldiers no longer jeered. The silence was absolute, broken only by the echoing shofars that shook the city. And when the 7th circuit ended, Joshua gave the command.
Now, shout, for the Lord has given you the city.
And then Israel shouted. A deafening roar filled the air, and in that instant, the walls of Jericho began to shake. They cracked, they crumbled, and within seconds, Jericho fell. Its gates burst open, and the army of Israel charged into the city. But amid judgment, God remembered mercy. For in the collapsed rubble, one house remained standing, Rahab's house, and in its window hung the scarlet cord, the symbol of her faith. The spies found her and brought her out with her family. And so, the woman once scorned by her people became part of God's people. Rahab would be remembered in history, centuries later, from her lineage. The Messiah himself would be born. Joshua stood in the ruins of the city. Flames licked the sky. Streets lay in ashes. And then, Joshua made a declaration, a warning for generations to come.
Cursed be the man who rebuilds this city. He will lay its foundations at the cost of his firstborn, and set up its gates at the cost of his youngest.
And so, Jericho was erased from the map. No one dared rebuild it until centuries later, when a man ignored this curse and paid with the lives of his sons, for what God has declared endures forever. The victory at Jericho emboldened Israel. Joshua ordered an advance on Ai, a small town, an easy target. The spies reported,
My lord, no need to send the whole army. Ai is weak. 3,000 men will suffice.
Then march and take the city.
But when Israel attacked, the Canaanites drove them back. They routed Israel's forces. 36 men fell. The army fled in chaos. Joshua fell to his knees and cried out,
Lord, why have you abandoned us? You gave us this land. Now our enemies destroy us.
Israel has sinned. Someone among you has stolen what is mine. Until the sin is purged, you cannot stand victorious.
God revealed the culprit, a man named Achan. He had taken gold and a Babylonian robe from Jericho, hidden them under his tent, thinking no one would see. But God had seen. Joshua confronted him.
Achan, confess before the Lord. What have you done?
I have sinned. I saw a robe from Babylon, silver and gold, and I took them. They're buried in my tent.
The people wept over their sin, but God could not allow corruption among his people. Achan was executed, the sin was purged, and only then could Israel press forward in conquest. Joshua learned the lesson. Israel prevailed not by strength nor by numbers, but by obedience. When they turned from sin, the Lord fought for them. Joshua gathered his captains. This time, they would not rely on their own might. They would wait for God's strategy. And God spoke to Joshua.
Do not fear, Joshua. This time I will give you victory. Set an ambush behind the city. Make the enemy believe you're fleeing. And when they pursue, strike from the rear.
Joshua obeyed. He divided the army. One force hid behind Ai, the other marched to its gates. Canaanites, remembering their last triumph, laughed. They assumed Israel would flee again, but when they chased Joshua, the hidden force attacked the undefended city. Ai was engulfed in flames, and God's people claimed victory. For this time the Lord fought with them. Yet not all enemies wielded swords. Some wielded deception. In Canaan lived a people called the Gibeonites. They saw what Israel did to Jericho and Ai, and knew they could not win in battle. So they resolved to trick Joshua. Seen, Gibeonites staining clothes, wearing cracked sandals, carrying moldy bread. They put on ragged clothes, packed stale bread and cracked wineskins, then went to Israel's camp, posing as distant travelers. Before Joshua they groveled.
We come from a far-off land. We've heard of your God's power. We know he gave you this country. Please make a treaty with us.
Joshua inspected their worn sandals, their crumbling bread, and thought, these can't be Canaanites. But he didn't consult God, didn't seek the Lord's counsel. He acted on his own and swore a peace pact. 3 days later, the truth surfaced. The Gibeonites weren't foreigners. They were Canaanites.
You deceived us. You chose lies over surrendering to God.
My lord, we feared for our lives. We knew we couldn't win, so we found another way to survive.
From now on, you'll serve Israel. You'll chop wood and haul water for the altar of God.
The Gibeonites lived, but their deceit carried a heavy price. For when Canaan's kings saw Gibeon surrender, they saw betrayal. The Gibeonites lived, but their deceit carried a heavy price.
Gibeon has turned traitor. They've allied with Israel. If we don't destroy them, all Canaan will fall.
5 kings united, armies mobilized. Thousands of soldiers marched against Gibeon. The Gibeonites, trapped with no escape, sent a desperate plea to Joshua.
Don't abandon us, Joshua. You swore a pact with us. If you don't come, we'll be slaughtered.
But we march tonight by dawn. God will give us victory.
Israel pressed forward without rest, advancing through darkness. At daybreak, they ambushed the 5 armies. The enemy panicked, but as they fled, God intervened.
Today I will crush your enemies.
Then from heaven, hailstones like boulders rained down. More foes died by God's storm than by Israel's swords. For this battle wasn't Joshua's, it was the Lord's. Yet the sun began to set, the enemy scattered. Joshua knew, if night fell, they'd escape. So he raised his hand and roared to the skies.
Sun, stand still over Gibeon. Moon, halt over Aijalon's valley.
For the first time in history, the sun stopped. The moon froze, because God heard a man's voice. The battle raged until Israel triumphed. The kings fled to a cave, hiding in shadows, but there was no escape. Joshua captured them, and before all Israel, executed them. For Canaan was marked for judgment. Canaan's kings fell, fortified cities crumbled, armies scattered. But the war wasn't over. Canaan was vast. Many lands remained unconquered. Joshua would not rest until every tribe received its inheritance. Joshua fought on, first the south, then the north, city after city. Kingdom after kingdom fell to Israel's sword.
We will not stop. Every tribe will claim its land. God gave it to us. We must take it.
One by one, 31 kings were defeated, from Hebron to Debir, Bethel to Lachish, Hazor to Sidon. When the last stronghold lay in ruins, the war ended. Israel owned the land. Now it was time to divide it. At Gilgal, Israel's elders gathered. As the allotment began, one man stepped forward, a warrior, an old man, one of the last survivors of the Exodus generation, Caleb, son of Jephunneh.
Joshua, you and I were there. When Moses sent the 12 spies, only we believed the promise. Our brothers doubted, but we trusted God. Now look, I'm 85, yet I fight like the day we left Egypt. So give me the land God swore to me. Give me Hebron, and with the Lord's help, I'll drive out the giants who live there.
Joshua looked at his old friend. He remembered their days in Egypt, the years in the wilderness, how over 40 years ago they alone had trusted the promise. With a smile, he granted the land.
Hebron is yours, Caleb. Go and conquer. God has given you.
And Caleb, at 85 years old, marched into battle. He defeated the giants, took Hebron, and his descendants inherited the land forever. For faith is always rewarded. But not all claims were peaceful. Some tribes complained.
If your numbers are great, take the hill country. Drive out the remaining Canaanites. God has given you victory. Go and fight for your inheritance.
So tribe by tribe, Israel received its portion, from Judah in the south to Dan and Naphtali in the north. Each took possession of their land, yet not all expelled the Canaanites. Some let enemies live among them. Though the war ended, the seeds of conflict remained. But this era wasn't just war. It was justice too. God commanded Joshua to designate cities of refuge, havens where accidental killers could flee and receive fair judgment. For God is not just a God of battle, but of mercy. Years passed. Joshua grew old. He'd fought his battles, led Israel. Now it was time to depart. But before dying, he gathered the nation for a final charge.
Hear me, Israel. The Lord gave you this land. He delivered you from enemies. But I warn you, if you turn from him, if you serve the gods of these nations, disaster will come. So today, choose whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Joshua died at 110. He was buried in the land God had promised. With him, an era ended. But Israel's story was just beginning. For though peace reigned, the tribes would soon forget God. In the next generation, when there was no king in Israel, each would do as they saw fit. And so would dawn the age of the judges.
If you've made it this far, thank you. Joshua taught us that faithfulness to God brings victory, that obedience opens doors, and that every promise of God will be fulfilled. To help us bring you more biblical films, support this content, like, share, and subscribe. because coming soon we'll release Judges the movie. The story of the heroes God raised up when Israel forgot their covenant. Don't miss it. And if you haven't seen our previous films, we recommend starting with Genesis, the beginning of everything. Then watch Moses and the Exodus, the story of how the nation of Israel began. But if you've already seen those, here are 2 more options for you. Esther, the movie, the story of a courageous woman who saved her people. Or Daniel, the movie, about the prophet who stood against empires with his faith. Choose one, and keep exploring with us the wonders of God's Word. We'll see you at our next premiere. May God bless you. Amen.